Okay, I think we're ready to start.
Cool. Okay. Well, hi everyone. My name is Alastair Reid. I'm a journalist currently at Press Association, which is the UK's oldest news agency. But today I'm not representing Press Association. I'm previously ran a course with TOL, who are organising this in Prague in person, and they asked me to come back and do another one online. Over the course of the next 8 weeks, we're going to be talking about a lot of different issues regarding the topic of misinformation and how to spot it, how to debunk it, looking at the sources and looking at why it is effective as well. That's what we're going to be talking about today. We also have a Facebook group, which is set up at the moment where the slides from this will be posted, and also any other relevant reading material that will be useful for the week that has just passed, but also for the week that is going ahead. Just to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running this. I joined Press Association about 6 weeks ago, but before that, I was the managing editor of an organization called First Draft. First Draft was set up in 2015 with the intention to raise skills and awareness about how news organizations and journalists use social media in their reporting. And a lot of that was around like social news gathering. The fact that, whenever there's a big breaking news event these days, a lot of the time, the first pictures and videos that we see from that event will appear on social media. And in that situation, a lot of the time, there are also fake pictures and videos and reports, as we'll come to see in a bit more detail soon. And as that organization, as time went on, the issue of misinformation and now what is called fake news by a lot of people, and we'll also discuss when something is or isn't fake news and why language is important around this. That topic has become huge in terms of mainstream discussion. It was always a problem, especially on social media and on the internet, and it has been there for centuries, but it's really become a much more widely discussed issue in the last year, really. It was in the build-up to the US election that it became so prominent, and since, and First Draft became quite prominent in finding ways to help people navigate this and understand this. When it first launched, it had a lot of different organizations who have got a lot of experience, and a lot of individuals who have got a lot of experience doing this. And it since has about maybe 80 organizations which all are sharing skills, sharing information and intelligence, and trying to collaborate to find some solutions on this, including the social networks. Before that, I was editor of journalism.co.uk, which is Europe's leading publication, online publication for developments in digital journalism. So all of this kind of stuff, for me personally, has been something that has been a part of my career. How journalists find information online, how they know what's true and what's not, the kind of digital tools and techniques that we can apply for all parts of our job. But this specific topic of why it is an issue, and why, and more importantly, I think why people believe the things that they believe, even when there is evidence that that's not true, that's always been something which has been of a lot of high interest to me, that has kind of come together with this topic and my work as well. Can everybody hear okay for now? I know that a lot of the microphones are off, but I can see a couple of people. If you give me a thumbs up if everything is okay so far. Cool, excellent. So I'm going to get started with the presentation now, and after the presentation and the slides, we will have some time for questions. It will be, if you want to ask anything during the presentation, I won't be able to see because I will have my screen will be full, but Jack, who is from TOL, I think if people type things in, they can see things. Is that correct?
Right, so here on the sidebar of the screen, should be able to just join the chat there. Does everyone see my message? Okay, great. Yeah, so feel free to ask all questions here on the sidebar. And yeah, that's just the best way of, I think, doing it. So
sure. Yeah, I really encourage asking questions, but if a lot of people asking questions all the time, I won't be able to answer them. I won't be able to see the questions being asked. Jack, perhaps if you feel there's something, if there's a time you need to stop me, please do. If there's a problem or anything else.
Okay, I figured, I didn't know if you had a designated question and answer session, but yeah.
So we will definitely do questions and answers at the end, but if there's something particularly important that you need me to stop, please let me know. I won't be able to see that because I will be sharing my screen for the presentation. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. Well, that's got very strange. So can you all see that? Is that looking okay, Jack?
Yeah, that's looking good to me.
Cool.
Everyone else?
Yep.
All right.
Great. So let's get started. Becoming an expert fact checker and hoax buster. That's what we're all here for. Let's do a little quick introduction. Newspapers were, of course, one of the ways, and the printing press and the written word was one of the ways which information traveled, and the news was written for centuries. And for a very long time, the best way, or the only way, that someone could reach an audience, of thousands of people to tell something and spread the news was if they had a printing press that can print a newspaper, or if they had a radio station or a television station, right? Up until very recently, that was what you needed to reach an audience of potentially, thousands, if not millions of people. Now, with the internet, and especially with social media, anyone can write anything, and if it is exciting enough, or if it makes people angry, or if it is shocking, or if it is funny, it can also reach an audience of thousands or millions of people. And this has had some really positive effects. You only need to look at things like the Arab Spring, in which people were being oppressed by their governments, and they were able to tell the world what was happening. This is a vitally important and it's fantastic for democracy. Now, if we look at it in 2017, there are billions of people across the world who are all on these different social networks. So on Facebook has nearly 2 billion people. These statistics are from a website called statista.com. I got them yesterday, so they're really up to date. Facebook has got nearly 2 billion people. WhatsApp has got more than 1 billion. YouTube and Facebook Messenger have got more than 1 billion. And if you look down this list, there are millions, billions of people who are online and who have the ability to tell the world anything, to have that go viral, or to have it reach a huge audience. And increasingly, that's where people are getting their news from as well. It's not just a way for people to distribute information, but it's also becoming a really important way for people to get the information that they trust and that they base decisions on, that they make important decisions on about how they're going to vote or about how they see the world. This, unfortunately, is just in Europe. This was from the Reuters Institute Digital News Report last year. I know very soon, in maybe a month's time, there will be a new one. But this is going up. There are more and more people online, on social media, and more of them are getting their news from social media. And it's not just news in this situation. This is how people report the news is changing, that you have a breaking news situation, people start talking around it and analyzing it, and then it becomes a cycle. And that's very important. But at the same time, into this situation, we have rumors and hoaxes and lies. We have people who are trying to spread misinformation or disinformation, and we'll come to the difference in a second. But this happens all the time now. During the Paris attacks 2 years ago, or nearly a year and a half ago, we had people sharing things which just weren't true that were getting reported. There was a poor man who was pictured up, you can see in the top left there, who is pictured holding what looks like a Quran and is meant to have a bomb vest. That is completely fabricated. They changed the picture. He was holding an iPad in the original. He was just taking a photo of himself, and someone changed that to make it look like a bomber. Elsewhere, we have the Eiffel Tower being turned off. None of these reports that came through in the Paris attacks, they were all fake. Equally, during the Brussels attacks, there were these videos posted very quickly alleging to be CCTV footage from inside the airport or inside the metro station. And they spread, and they were on the front pages of news organizations on their websites, and they were all fake. During the Turkish coup, or the attempted coup in Turkey, all of these pictures of crowds and of tanks and that Donald Trump tweet, all fake. During the disappearance of an Egypt air flight, there was someone claiming that their mum was missing, that was on the plane and they were missing. There was another published by news organizations that said this is a ball of fire in the sky over Greece and that people thought it was the flight, all fake. During the Nice truck attack, more pictures of that same guy, that same poor guy who just took a photo of himself being shared as the attacker, one of the attackers, and then more fake victims, people saying that this is my friend or my brother or my sister, but these are real people, but they were not there, all fake. Also, during the Munich attack, more pictures and videos, fake. And it started to become last year as well, happening during different political events where people were trying to change how people viewed candidates or viewed the situation. These are from the build-up to the current election in the UK in just 3 weeks' time. People are sharing pictures and videos which just aren't true. Happened during the French election a few weeks ago. And it happened during the US election as well. And this is happening at quite a scary rate, and it affects how people view the world around them, and it can affect how people vote. And I'm sure it happens in your countries to a different degree, whether it's high, whether it's low. I can be sure that it's why we're here, is that it will be happening there as well. And one of the main issues around how and why this is so successful and how it spreads on social media is because social media is a different way of receiving information and viewing information. And it was actually found recently that the percentage of people who see and get their news from social media, a lot of them don't actually know what the source is. That's something which often, when in the past, when we would know a trusted source, and whether that was a newspaper or whether that was a friend or family, we would know what the source was, and that would play into whether we thought something was true or not, and whether we would share it. Now, people see things and they just don't know what the source is. This was a video posted into a group in the UK. British Politics is a Facebook group in the UK, and someone posted this video saying, I don't know if you can see there, but it says, "Dear France, how is that assimilation working out for you?" What they are saying is that the video was of some riots, and they were saying, these are Muslims, these are refugees, these are migrants who are coming to France and they are rioting. That was the message that this person was trying to send. In the comments, you can see here, someone says, someone says it is Uber riots, and that's the truth. These were riots from French taxi drivers in Paris when Uber, the app and the ride-hailing company came to Paris. Taxi drivers rioted. Someone has taken this video and said this is something else. In the comments, they said it's Uber riots, and another person said, how do people know it's Uber riots? One side of the media is lying at the end of the day. I don't know either. And what is happening with all of this misinformation, with all of these lies coming into the in the news and in social media, people are getting very confused and they don't know what to trust, to the point where trust in media, trust in journalism and news organizations is now at an all-time low. It's distrusted, and this is from the Edelman report at the start of this year, it's distrusted in 82% of the countries that they spoke to, and it's at an all-time low in 17 countries. And this is a real problem when people don't know what to trust and what to believe. It means that some people, and whether that is a government or a politician, it means that they can, in this mix, they can say what they like. And if they say it loud enough, and if they say it often enough, people will start to believe it, even if it's not true. So as journalists and as responsible users of social media, we all need to be a bit more aware about what is true and what is not, and how to prove that, how to know, how to debunk certain hoaxes and bust those hoaxes and check those facts. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next 8 weeks. This is a quick overview of the topics we'll be looking at. This might change a little bit. Maybe it will change a little bit. I don't want it to change, but it might. But just to give you a quick overview, today we're going to be talking about the different types and sources of misinformation. What do we mean when we say misinformation? Where does it come from? What does it look like? And why do people believe it? Next week, we're going to look at an introduction in how some of the basic steps and techniques and how to debunk these stories, but also the best way to think about monitoring it and looking for them and finding out how they are spreading, who is spreading this. After that, we'll go into a bit more detail about the tools and techniques to find it, but also some of the important parts in terms of finding the original version of a picture or video and investigating a source. In week 4, we'll go a bit more advanced from that, and we'll look at geolocation, looking at finding if we see a picture or a video that someone says is from a specific event, we need to prove where it is actually from. The time and the date is really important here as well, because often people will share things that are old and claim it is new, so we will show how we can prove what is old and what is new. And we'll also look at manipulation. Shadows and reflections are a big part of when somebody tries to fake something, when they use image manipulation software. The shadows and the reflections are something that they often forget, so we'll look at how to do that in some forensic detail. We'll have a guest lecturer, hopefully in session 5. And then we'll look at some best practices in how do we actually communicate the truth to audiences. That's a big part of this. Because if we can't make the truth as shareable or as interesting as the lie, then we're not doing our jobs right. We have to make sure that the truth is shared on social media with people as widely as the lie is. That's a big part of this too. And tracing the sources of misinformation. How can we find out where this is coming from? Which leads on to session 7, investigating the websites and the networks and the individuals who are distributing this. How do we find out where it's coming from? How do we find out more about who these people are? Before a guest lecturer at the end. Now, there are, we could talk about this in a lot of detail. We could run an entire university course about this, to be honest, because there are people and there are parts of the internet who are doing this at a very high level. And I really encourage you to look around and find the communities online that are already talking about this, because we won't be able to cover everything. We will cover as much as we can in the time, but we won't be able to go into the detail that exists out there already. So I will recommend some reading, but also I encourage you to go out and find these communities as well and be active in this and be a kind of active learner. Go out and find extra information as well as what I tell you, as well as the things that we share with you, because there is more to learn than what I can tell you in these 8 weeks. So, the different types and sources of misinformation. What I mentioned before about the rumors and the mistakes, hoaxes and lies, these are kind of different ways of understanding it, because language is important. So we have rumors. Rumors are a kind of, it's a natural way for people to understand or to try to make sense of what is happening, especially in a breaking news situation. They might see that something is happening, and then they might see something else, and they will connect the two, but they might be wrong. So often, if you see an attack, people might say that there is going to be another one very soon, because they connect two pieces of information in the wrong way. That's a rumor. It's people making a mistake, essentially. It's a rumor and mistake are quite similar, but people sharing false information accidentally is what's quite clearly a mistake. Later, though, we get into hoaxes. These are people who are trying to make jokes or make money or gain followers by sharing or saying something which isn't true. And they know that it's not true. But the reason that they do it is for fun or for money or on social media to gain followers. And then, of course, we have lies. And these are people who have a political or a social agenda. And they are trying to push that. And they are trying to get those ideas into people's heads, but based from lies. And this is, in Europe at the moment, this is quite a big issue with immigration and refugees, that often some people are sharing things which aren't true to try and make the situation seem worse than it is around refugees and migrants. And yes, there are problems, and there can be problems with refugees and migrants, but it is probably the biggest area of misinformation. It's important to separate these two, because on the left there, rumors and mistakes, the intention is, there is no intention to deceive. You know, they're not trying to tell someone a lie, they're making a mistake. On the right, they are intending to tell a lie to spread something which is not true. And the language that we use is important. The words that we use are important, because more and more people are saying things like fake news, or they're saying this is not true, because they want to undermine journalists. They want to make journalists and journalism seem less honest, so that they can share their own information when it's not true, as we were discussing before. And it can actually happen, in this case, a reporter's error. In the story from the Columbia Journalism Review, a reporter's error became evidence for a fake news claim because someone made a mistake, and people who didn't like that said that it was fake news. They tried to say that this was an intentional mistake. So it's important that we understand the difference between misinformation and disinformation, and the intent. Whether people intend, whether people want to share something which is false, or whether they are making a mistake. And it's important to understand the difference there when we're talking about this. And we'll come into that more later in later sessions. But what are these types of misinformation? What does it actually look like, and where does it come from? What I mentioned just a minute ago about intent, about what people want to do and what they mean when they say something which is wrong, it's important to understand that as well. Because at one end, we have satire and parody, and these are examples. A lot of these examples are going to be from the UK and the US and Europe, and I apologize for that now, but that is where my area of expertise and reference comes from. But satire and parody is making a joke. You know, that's making a joke at someone who is in power. And that is important in a democracy. It's important to be able to make jokes about people in power and have that free speech. That's what's important. So satire and parody and making jokes around that, it's at the kind of the low end of the scale of intent. It should be clear with a satire or parody that something isn't true. Here, it should be clear that Steve Bannon in the US hasn't made a nest. They are implying that he isn't human. It's a joke. It's meant to be funny. Here, Corbyn, who is a politician in the UK, now a slang term for a useless thing. These are jokes, and it's important to make jokes with powerful people for democracy and free speech. It should be obvious that they're jokes, and that is satire or parody at the lower end of the scale. We also have clickbait, which is having a misleading headline, making the headline seem more exciting or more interesting, or just having something that isn't true in the headline so that people will click on it to go to a website. This is something which we see as a problem in online with a lot of websites who want people to click on their link, go to the website, and hopefully they'll make some money from advertising. That's also at that end where we see this sometimes with news organizations, where they will have what we call a clickbait headline to make people click on it, go to the website. But again, that's at the kind of the lower end of this scale of intent of what people are trying to do. They don't want to deceive, they just want you to go to the website. We also have misleading stories though. And these are stories which are not 100% false, but they are also not 100% true. And some journalists and some news organizations write misleading stories because they have a political or social agenda to push. Again, they are not completely false, they are not completely true, but they are misleading. They maybe make some information seem more important and other information seem less important, so that the reader will go away thinking something which is slightly off, something that's slightly away from the precise truth. So we're getting further along here, along the scale of intent, in terms of what people are trying to do and the different types and sources of different types of misinformation. Here, false context is when people use something which was true once, was true at one time, but they are taking it and saying it is new in a different situation. These examples that we have. In the middle is the one I told you before, the Uber riots, and this is in a different example. It's the same video. People are saying, again, I don't know if you can see, but Muslim migrants and radical leftists are attempting to destroy the French economy by stopping commerce. That's not true. It is an old video. What happens in the video is it's from a news event before, it's from the Uber riots, but they are now saying it's from a different situation. On the left, we have the Munich shooting or an active shooter drill. In that situation, the video was from a police training exercise in Manchester, and people have taken that video and said it is from Munich. On the right, we have Germans take to the streets chanting, "Germany stands with you, France." That is also not true. That is from a previous event. And it's important that we make clear when we're doing this where things are coming from when we are doing the debunk. But that, as we're going along this scale, we're finding things taken out of context to try and share a message. We also have imposters. So these are, maybe they are social media accounts, or maybe they are websites which are trying to look like a trusted source, but they are not. So I don't know if you can see on the Donald J. Trump tweet there, if you can see the username actually says real Donald Trump with an E, whereas the actual Donald Trump account is real Donald Trump. We have a website pretending to be the New York Times, and we have another website pretending to be ABC News. Now, these examples, they are people who are both being, they are telling lies about who they are, and they are telling lies in what they say. So it's a double whammy. It's a double piece of lying in trying to look like a trusted, real source of information so that they can share something which isn't true. So that's on the imposter side. Then we have the manipulated content, when it's a picture or a video which has been changed using image editing or video editing software. The example that I gave before with this poor man who had his picture plastered everywhere and made to look like an example, like a terrorist, when he is not. And also an example that we'll come to in a minute with some boats which have been copied to look like there are more of, and I'll explain more in more detail about that soon. So the last one on this is just completely fabricated content, when everything about this is not true. The website is not true, the claim is not true, everything about it is completely made up, as we say. It's completely fabricated. There is nothing true about it. And it's, when we're thinking about this kind of stuff, it's more important to, the further to the right, the further along the scale of intent we go, the more important it is to tell as many people as possible that something isn't true. So those are the different types of misinformation. We've got satire and parody, which is definitely not true, but it's a joke. And it's often making a joke about an issue or a person that is being discussed a lot. But it is important for democracy that people make jokes about politics, or people make jokes about politicians in a lot of cases. Clickbait is when people are trying to make you click on a website or a link, and it's not fake, but it's also not entirely true, but they just want you to go to the website. Misleading stories, again, it's not 100% fake, but it's not 100% true. It's people trying to push a particular agenda. But then we have the false context. This is when we get into the real fakes, the real disinformation, when people take something out of context from an old picture or video and try and say it's from a new event, or when people are imposters, when they pretend to be a trusted source, but they're not, and they say something which isn't true. Then we have the manipulated content with pictures and videos, and also the fabricated content on the end, which is everything is not true. Let's get into the sources of information as well. I know I'm going quite fast on this, but you can review it all afterwards, and I'll have all the slides up. But let's look at the sources of misinformation as well. Where does this actually come from? Who is actually sharing it? So, official propaganda. This, of course, is something which is very important to check and to debunk, and it can take lots of different forms. But sometimes there are officials in government or from governments around the world who are trying to trick the public and journalists into publishing or believing something which isn't true. The two examples we have here, on the left in the Times of London tweet, we have a picture from a North Korean news agency where they are showing their navy, and saying, look how big, look how many boats we have, look at the size of our armed forces. But they actually just copied 2 of the boats and put them in different places. The one in green, it's even difficult to say if that is a copy and paste or what that is, but it's clear that they have manipulated this to make it seem like their navy, their boats, they have more than they actually do. On the right, we have an Iranian image in which it was distributed by an Iranian news agency trying to show that they have a more powerful military, again, than they actually do, by copying some of the missiles and by using a image manipulation program, whether that's Photoshop or whether that's something else, to make it clear or make it appear that their military is stronger than it actually is. We also saw this during the MH17, the flight that was shot down over Ukraine, when some of the information shared by Russia afterwards was found by many sources to not be true. In this example, you can see that the picture from Elliot Higgins, the picture on the left that he shared is from what information distributed by the Russians was saying, here is a satellite image of where the plane was. But if you look at the actual picture of the plane, they got the position of the logo wrong. Someone else actually found out that the image used in the Russian report that they shared to say that to say this is what happened, the image that they used was actually the first image that appeared when you searched for the Boeing in Russian. That says Boeing top view in Russian, and the #1 picture there. If you put the 2 together, you should be able to see that they are the same. And someone actually turned this into a GIF. Hopefully it will play. You can see the 2 match up perfectly. This is an example, like all the others, of official propaganda where a government or an official organization is trying to trick journalists or other people into believing something. So that's an important example of where the sources of misinformation in this case. In another example, we have, I'll let you watch the video first, but another source of this is activists, marketers, and businesses who are trying to maybe present a message or maybe make money. I'll let you watch this video before we talk about it quickly. This is apparently an exclusive Shell party, Shell being the oil company at the Space Needle, and they call it's an epic PR fail. Let's have a quick look at this. Can I just check, can you hear that okay? Could you hear the audio on it? Let's have a look.
I couldn't hear it.
You couldn't hear it? Okay, let's see if I can make the audio work. 1 minute.
Yeah, it works now.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so put your glass right over here, Ian, and we'll fill you up. Here we go. Charles, yeah. That's just go for it. You can't hurt it. Why are you still filming?
Obviously, you have a mess up.
Can I have that phone, please?
Okay, so that video, they're saying that it was an exclusive party for the oil company and that they had this little model oil well. And then when the old lady who was opening the, celebrating the party, she wanted to fill up her glass with the drink, the oil, pretend oil from the well went everywhere. It went all over her clothes. It went all over the floor. They couldn't control it. They couldn't turn it off. And it was, as they say here, an epic PR fail. This video was actually made by Greenpeace, and it was distributed as a message that once you have an open oil well, you can't always control what happens, and that is bad for the world, bad for the environment. But it was fake, and people thought it was new. It was real for a while. There were also all of these videos, which were all of them. You may recognize some of them, of the maybe the bear, the woman who is on the snowboard in the bottom left, being chased by a bear. There's the man who jumps into Sydney Harbour, I think it was, and there was a great white shark there. There was also the a man who runs into a tornado in the Australian outback. Now, all of these videos were created by the same marketing company because they wanted to show that they were good at making viral videos, and they were. These videos all had a lot of views, they all went viral, but none of them were true, and a lot of them were reported by news organizations as true, and a lot of people believed they were true. What else do we have? There are also these examples where there was people who are trying to make a point. On the left, there's the Syrian hero boy. I don't know if you remember that video, that someone made a video alleging to show a young boy saving a girl while there are bullets and they are being shot at, but that it was made by a director in Norway to show what was happening to children in Syria. And on the right, there was a company faked an Instagram account, which they said was by a migrant making his way to Europe, but it was not. It was by an athlete, a sports player in Spain, and they just took the pictures and made it seem like that because they wanted to raise awareness about it. But again, these were reported as true and believed as true by a lot of people. We also have straight fake news websites, and these can be satire websites as well. Satire websites are, they are not necessarily a bad thing, as we discussed already, but the fake news websites, especially as journalists, we have to know the difference. We have to know what is a fun joke website like the one on the left, or what is an actual fake news website like the one on the right. The one on the left there, the pastor trying to walk on water at the Crocodile River gets eaten by 3 crocodiles. At the start of this week, a lot of news organizations published that story because they didn't realize it was true. It had gone to, it published on National News Bulletin first, which is a satire website. It's a joke website that they write jokes. And then other people published the story. The story was that a pastor, a preacher, a Christian preacher, said, look, I can walk on water like Jesus, and he got eaten by crocodiles. That was the story, and apparently that was the joke. This story went to lots of different websites until it was reported by real news organizations because they didn't do the proper checks until it was eventually discovered. On the right there, that's a fake news website. It's a joke story, but they're trying to make it look like a real thing with real stories and fake stories all mixed together so that they can get advertising revenue. And we will go later on in the course, we will look at how we can go into detail to check out these websites and find out what's true and what's not, and dig into who owns them and see if there are any connections between the kind of websites that share these kind of things. So go back quickly, we've got sources of misinformation, we've got official propaganda, we've got marketers and businesses and activists, we've got the fake news and the satire websites, but we've also got, sorry, I missed a part there. One very easy way to check, which I wanted to show you, was just to look at the About page. This is something which everyone should do, really. If you see a crazy story which you think is crazy enough to, to potentially be fake, just look at the About page. With this National News Bulletin site, if people had just found and searched for the story and looked at the About page, they would have seen that it was satire. Equally, on this website, which a lot of people believed for a while in the build-up to the US election, if you just go to the About page, it will say that it is a satirical website. It's a news and political satire publication. It's one of the quickest and easiest checks, and it's often one that people don't do. They're also just individuals. Now, these are the hard ones, because it's much harder to figure out whether someone is telling the truth or not online when you don't know who they are. These are all quite famous examples of just individuals who are sharing hoaxes. The breaking confirmed flooding on the New York Stock Exchange, that person, that tweet, as you can see at that point, it had 570 retweets. A lot of people were sharing that information. A lot of people were believing it was true. He was just a liar. He was just making something up. Equally, the 2 women there, she is, or it's the same woman, but those tweets are saying that she is a victim from a terror attack. In truth, she is a kind of TV personality or a famous person in Mexico, and someone in Mexico took the picture and tried to trick people in Europe into believing that she was hurt in the Nice attack. On the right there, we've got a guy, Tommaso de Benedetti, who, as it says, faked the identities of world leaders and fooled editors into publishing false stories. He just wanted to try and trick people. And if you can read in the small print, he said he announced the deaths of Pope Benedict, Fidel Castro, and Pedro Almodovar. He lied, and he wanted to try and trick people. And this is one of the harder parts, but there are ways to check that out, as we will come to later in the course as well. But there is also you and I. We are sources of misinformation if we don't do these checks. And a big part of it as well is to prove, not just assume the truth when we're doing this. We have to think about it when we are finding things out and when we are doing our fact checking from a completely objective position. We have to try to leave our views and leave our beliefs outside of the process. And it's a big part in social media, and a big part of how we do our jobs is applying that objective process. Now, I still occasionally, it still happens to me sometimes that I believe something which isn't true because of a number of reasons. And this is why it's so effective on social media. There's this idea of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the idea, and it's often true, that we are more likely to believe something, we are more biased to believe something if it confirms what we understand about the world or how we want the world to be. So if I was, for example, if I believed that migrants were a bad thing or migration was a bad thing, then I would be more likely to believe something which said, here are migrants being bad, if you understand me. If I thought that, like that video before about the environment, if I thought that oil companies do bad things, then I would be more likely to believe that video because it confirms my beliefs. It fits with my beliefs. And that's a big part of how misinformation travels online, is because it confirms what people believe. And we have to try to let go of that when we're doing this kind of work. Another big part of it is visual information. We are more likely to believe something that is very visual than just a written article. We often don't use our critical thinking with something that is visual because that would make life so much more difficult. If every time I wanted to leave a room, I had to verify and fact check that a door is a door, it would take me forever to get somewhere. If every time I had a glass of water, I had to fact check and verify that the glass is real, it would take me too long to do everything. We are more likely to believe something that is visual because we are more likely, it's more immediate. We don't apply our critical thinking every time we open our eyes and every time we look at something. There are also the idea of filter bubbles that on social media and on Facebook in particular, people share things that fit and support what their followers and what their friends believe. And often, if I was to share something that fit with what my friends believe, they would say they liked it. They give me a thumbs up on Facebook, or they give me a heart on Twitter or on Instagram. And that, you get that positive reinforcement. Sometimes that can mean sharing things for some people which aren't true because they get a positive reinforcement. Finally, there's the trusted sources. We are more likely to believe something that comes from our friends or our family, people that we know, people that we trust already. We're more likely to believe that than we are from things and people and sources that we don't know and that we don't trust already. And all of these things together combine to mean that misinformation on social media is such a big problem, because all of these things mean it travels faster and it travels further, and it's harder for people to not think about this, to not use that critical thinking and to do that fact checking. And that's what we're going to be doing over the course of this next 8 weeks. So to quickly recap the different types and the different sources of information. Satire and parody, making jokes about politicians, making jokes about politics, about issues. And that's important in democracy. That's important for free speech and in a free society. But as we go down the scale of intent, as people try to mean it more, we have clickbait, where people want you to click on a headline which might leave some information out, which might not be 100% true, but they want you to go to the website. But we also have misleading stories, where people want you to believe something different, but they might only present some information and not give you the whole picture. It's not 100% true, but it's not 100% false. Then we have the false context, which is people often taking old pictures or old videos and saying it is from a new event, either because they want to get followers, or because they want to try to push a political or social idea. We also have imposters, where people pretend to be someone that they're not, and whether that is a famous person like Donald Trump, as we saw with that fake account, or if it's a website like a fake New York Times website or a fake ABC website, when people are pretending to be a trusted source so that they can tell a lie and have people believe it. We also have manipulated content, when people will take a picture, but they will change it, and a picture or a video, they will change it so it looks different and they're trying to send a different message. Finally, there's fabricated content, when everything about it is not true. It's just completely false. There's nothing true in there. When we're talking about the sources of misinformation, we have, of course, official propaganda, and this has been around for a long time, when a government often, or a political party maybe, is trying to share a message and it's just not true, to make themselves seem more powerful or more important, or to make people believe something which helps them. We also have activists, marketers, and businesses, when sometimes these people will share something or make something which isn't true because they want to push an idea or because they want to make money. It can be a number of different things. The sources, we also have fake news and satire websites, these websites which always share things which aren't true, either because they are making those jokes, which is fine. And satire and parody, it's not just from a website. People can share something which is satire or parody as well. And they can say things, and they can have accounts which are satire or parody. But these websites where they share things aren't true, either to get money or to make jokes. Then, of course, there's you and I. There's the individuals, and whether that is someone who is doing it on purpose or someone doing it as a mistake, it's important to understand the difference and understand where all these people are coming from and why they are doing it. I know we've covered quite a lot quite quickly today. As I said, all of these slides will be available to view on the Facebook group after this, and I'll put some extra information on there as well. But I believe we have some time for some questions and some discussions now, if you're still around, and if there are any questions that you'd like to ask. Jack, what's the best way to do this if you're still around? Is it better for them to type the questions and then we can talk about them from there?
That's what I was thinking, just so we don't have a bunch of people talking at once, just for the sake of communication. So I would just say, if you have any questions for Alastair, we do it in the chat bar on the right-hand side of the screen. So feel free to ask away at this point. And then Alastair, I was thinking, if there are questions, you could answer them verbally and out loud, and that would that would be the best. But
I'll read the question and then I'll answer them. So if you have a question, please type them in, and I can answer them.
All right.
We've got about 10 minutes left, right? 10, 15 minutes, something like that.
So yeah, go right ahead.
No problem, also. I hope it was. Also said in the comments, thank you for the presentation. My pleasure. I hope it was useful. If there are things which people want me to talk about in more detail now, about those things again, then I can help that. Aha, so I don't know if you can see, but we have one question from Anna that's come in. And also thank you so much. Thank you for saying thank you for the presentation, everyone. So Anna has posted a question which says, sometimes even reputable media outlets disseminate misinformation. Do you think the main reason for that is the lack of staff who are fact-checking or verifying news? Very true. So yes, there are reputable news organizations that distribute this information, and it's a mixture of things, in my view. Yes, there is the issue around the lack of training, and this is quite the scale. The amount of false information out there at the moment is much higher than previously because of the issues which we touched on already, because people are able to, anyone is able to say anything they like. But also in the last few years, people have begun to realize that they can influence a large amount of people by spreading lies on social media, so that the amount is out there. But when it comes to reputable organizations, sometimes it is often down to the skills and the staff and the training. But sometimes it's a mixture of that and the business model at the moment. There's a guy called Mark Little, who was the founder of Storeful, which is a news agency which called himself the first social news agency when they would find newsworthy material on social media. Mark Little founded it, and he said recently that you could not design a business model for journalism which would undermine truth more than the one that we have at the moment. He was saying that the way the media works now, in a lot of ways, in a lot of countries, where it's just put out lots and lots of articles and hope that lots and lots of people will come to the website for advertising, that is damaging trust massively, because the pressure is to get more and more articles and not to be more and more trusted. And this isn't at every news organization, far from it, but it does happen sometimes where there is such a big pressure in the newsroom to have more articles on a website, the website of a reputable, old, trusted news organization, that pressure is higher to have something than the pressure to get things right. And sometimes some websites, some news organizations will publish something which isn't true, but there's a lot of interest in it. They will get lots of clicks and traffic, and web traffic from it. And then later, some other people will say, hey, this isn't true. And then they will publish again saying this isn't true. That way they get 2 hits of the traffic. And it's a double win for them, except that it's a win in the short term, but in the long term, they become less trusted. So yes, there are parts of it, as you said in your question, do you think the main reason for that is the lack of staff or fact checking? But there is also the issue that the way the way the business models are set up and the way the industry is at the moment, with the collapse of print advertising revenues, and the fact that digital advertising revenues aren't making up the difference, that's become a big issue, and that's something together we're trying to find a solution for and discuss. Because at the moment, as we discussed earlier, that trust in news organizations is just going down and down and down, and that's a part of it as well. So Ulta has asked, how can we understand that something is misinformation? Do we have to be suspicious about every news? I mean, that's a big issue as well, to be honest. And part of how I think about it, to be honest, is that fake news and false news, misinformation, it is designed to give us a strong emotional response. So whether that is anger, or whether that is surprise, or whether that is humor, any of those things, if it gives you a strong emotional response, then that's a sign that you should check, that you should think slightly critically about it, especially as journalists. Often those checks can be very quick, and we'll come into that in more detail as well. Sometimes it can take longer, but that question that you asked, do we have to be suspicious about every news, is one of the real problems at the moment, that when people don't know what to believe, they end up believing things which feel right, even when it's not true. So unfortunately, yes, we do have to be suspicious and think in more detail about what we're reading, but especially if it gives us a strong emotional reaction, I'd say, because that is how it works. Misinformation, fake news, whatever we want to call it, disinformation, it's like clickbait. It is designed to give us a strong emotional response, and that is when we have to think critically. A question from Karine says, could you remember an example when it was very difficult for you to check the information? Yes, there are multiple times when it can be very difficult. Some of them will be in the course later, when it was very difficult and I had to use particular techniques to address it, which can take a long time. But it becomes easier. I mean, I don't want to go, I can go into the detail now, but I don't know if it will be useful until we do it. Okay, I'll give you a quick story. So one of them was of a bombing in Yemen. This was about a year ago. And this was one of the more difficult ones, where there was a bomb in Yemen, and we heard some reports, and Reuters was saying there's a bomb in Yemen. And then there was a video that was on Twitter, and it showed some people who, it showed a lot of dead people, it showed people carrying dead people. But how do we know that that is actually real? How do we know that? The way that we'd have to assess that is by looking at the location and seeing if we can find a match. And this is a big part of geolocation, as I said earlier. If there was no more information about what that looked like. That was the only picture or video that was online that showed this bombing. So how do we know that that's real? What I ended up having to do in that was look at, it was a number of things. It was the shadows, like the direction and the length of the shadows, to see if the time was right, and also to figure out what direction the camera was pointing, because it was meant to happen in the morning. So if the shadows are going from east to west, like it's in the morning, then we can know what direction the camera is pointing. We also had to figure out where the buildings were in the background and see if we could find them on satellite images. And it was hard and it took time, but we found in that case that it was true. And it's important that as journalists, we have to prove that something is true as well as if it's not true. In another case, there was someone sharing a video of, they were saying that it was African migrants were smashing up a cafe in Italy, but the video was actually from South Africa. And again, in that case, we had to find, look at the clues that were in the picture, look at the buildings, look at the roads, look at the street signs, look at the cafes, look at everything else, and see if we could find the original and find out where that came from. But we'll get into all of that in a lot more detail throughout the next 8 weeks. So we've got two questions from Volha. The first is, what is the difference between propaganda and persuasion? Well, propaganda, I'd say, is trying to persuade you something, but it is using information that is not true. To me, that's basically it. I mean, there's persuasion in conversation and when people discuss political issues, but you have to use facts. You have to use the truth. If propaganda is using lies, persuasion is using the truth. That's what I'd say the difference is. And the second question was, does propaganda always have ideological background and seeks for an active response? Propaganda, I'd say, does have an ideological background. I think this is, we're talking about the way that this is the language thing for English. Propaganda, yes, is ideological. If we are saying something is for money, then I'd say it's a hoax. That's the difference to me. So propaganda, yes, is ideological, and that can be from governments, that can be from, or it's power. You know, people are trying to persuade you of something because it makes them more powerful, or it makes their situation better in terms of politics, in terms of power. That's propaganda. Money, and when people are trying to do it for money, whether that's for advertising, whether that's for followers, whether that's whatever, marketing, you know, that's a hoax, and that's still a lie. Yeah, that's the difference, I'd say. Cool. I think we're coming to the end of the first hour. I'd be happy to take another question if anyone's got one. Ah, Anna, wait. So Anna says, right now there is a breaking news about a vehicle that struck pedestrians at Times Square. During this kind of news, it's of a key importance to be quick, but also provide verified information. Is it better to wait and verify first and provide information later rather than provide it right away? I'd say yes, it's better to be right, you know, to provide verified information first. This is something which there's a conversation has come up quite a lot in, you know, the last few years. And when I've been talking about this and going to conferences and going to different newsrooms, you know, different news organizations and talking about it, that's the issue, is the balance of speed and accuracy. Are you fast or are you right? Are you fast or are you correct? I'd say now in breaking news situations, so there are going to be a lot of people reporting or trying to report on this breaking news situation in Times Square. And everyone is going to, you know, the things that are right, the things that are correct, everyone is going to report those. And no one will remember who got that first, because everyone is reporting it. If you get something wrong, people will remember that because it will be different. You know, there was some focus groups done recently by Eyewitness Media Hub, who have done a lot of research on this, and they were part of First Draft, where they asked members of the public, you know, normal people, would you rather a news organization waited and verified something and checked it out, excuse me, or would you rather they put it up first? And the answer, they said, was they would, you know, the audience would rather that journalists got things right, because in their words, I think it was something like, if a journalist shows something in a breaking news situation, but they don't know it's true, then their motivation is not the truth. They are trying to be, you know, this is what the audience, these people were saying, that if they see a news organization or journalist sharing something before checking it, then they don't want to share the truth, that they want to be sensationalist. They want to get, you know, clicks on a website. They want to try and get it first out of competition with other journalists. Their motivation there isn't the truth. And people know this. People see this and people understand this. And, you know, it's wrong to underestimate our audiences and underestimate people who read the stories and breaking news that we do and think that they won't know, because they know. So yes, I'd say absolutely getting it right is more important than being fast. And I think, to be honest with you, that's the time. I'm going to put this information, you know, the slides that we've covered today and some other things up on the Facebook group. I believe, Jack, are you able to make sure that people are able to access that?
Right. So what I have been doing is the people that have messaged me back on Google and said that they want to be added, I've just been inviting them with their email address. So I think, you know, just give me the okay and I'll plug you in and send you all an invite. And then, yeah, we can go from there. But thank you all for joining, and we will reconvene at, I believe, the same time next week. And I'll send out another email prior to the session and a few days perhaps before, just so everyone can get the accurate time zone and time start and all of that. So, and please email me if you have any other questions or thoughts, and if there are any issues with today's session, just please let me know and I'll take care of them. But other than that, we're good.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Like I said, everything will be up there. Thanks a lot, Jack, and see you next week.
All right.